Okay, Torah portion Terumah then. When I looked at this Torah portion, I just thought, this is the beginning of Yahuwah explaining to us about where he wants to dwell when he comes to be on the earth with his people, an actual place that he wants to physically be. And it's the beginning of a whole huge part of the Torah, which explains about the offerings that are made to him. And it's the biggest thing that's in the Torah. As I looked at it, I thought, wow, this is the thing that he focuses on more than anything else. And I thought, I could probably teach on this for about 10 hours if I wanted to do a comprehensive teaching on the tabernacles and the purpose of the tabernacles, what it's all for. I thought this could just be the biggest teaching ever. And I had it laid out because there was something that I wanted to look at, something that we've not actually looked at before. I thought this would be good to do. Because in Ezekiel 40 through 48, we have the temple that is going to be on the earth after Yeshua's return. And that's not something that we've considered really before. I know it's certainly not something that I've looked at in great detail. I'm obviously aware of it peripherally. You know, I'm aware that there will be a temple in the millennium and that there will be animal offerings in the millennium. I'm aware of that, but I've never looked at it like really in depth. So I was going to look at that in the first part. Just look at the idea of people's attitudes to animals being offered to God, because there's a whole lot of misunderstanding that's associated with that. And then that was going to lead me into looking at the temple, the Millennial temple in Ezekiel 40 through 48. But as I'd finished that part, it was about 80 slides long. And if something for me is 80 slides long, it will be an hour and a half, 2 hours or something like that. If it's all scripture that I'm having to explain all of in depth, it'd probably be about an hour and a half or 2 hours. So I thought, well, that's too long for a part. I had that as part one. Part two, I was going to look at the body of Messiah. And then part three, I had a load of other stuff that I was going to look at. But I've looked at those things in previous years. So I thought the most important thing to look at here is Ezekiel's temple. So instead of that being the first part, I chopped it up into two, and I've made it the second part and the third part. And then the first part, I'm going to look at the body of Messiah from a slightly different perspective, building on the stuff that we've seen before. So I would say to people, because there's so much in this Torah portion, you know, we're going to go through a lot of it throughout the book of Leviticus. We'll get an opportunity to look at a load of stuff. But I would recommend watching the previous Torah portions on it, because there's a lot of good teaching on that. For people who are online who maybe don't know where to get access to all the previous teachings, if you go to the website, you see a tab at the top, which is Torah portions. It's the Torah portions, and you'll be able to see all of the first 5 books of Moses and what we started doing last year, which was covering the book of Joshua. If you go to, obviously we're in the book of Exodus at the moment, you go there, and the one that you want is this Torah portion, Terumah. So to look at us as the body of Messiah, as the temple, obviously the temple of Yahuwah, or the tabernacle of Yahuwah, is the place where he comes and dwells on the earth. This translation often calls it the dwelling place. The Mishkan comes from the verb shakan, to dwell somewhere. So the Mishkan is where Yahuwah dwells. We've seen before that this can be seen to be a picture of Yeshua. A lot of the things in the tabernacle were pictures of Yeshua himself. We've got our own bodies, our physical bodies, which are described as a dwelling place. It's in fact where our soul dwells with him. And then we've got us corporately as the body of Messiah. He is the head, and then we are his body, and that body is described as a mishkan, a place where he dwells. So he's the head, and then us as his body, we've all got our own functions, and that is described as a spiritual house, as a spiritual temple built in the Spirit. And that's what Ephesians 2, at the end of Ephesians 2, explains. It explains the house of Israel coming back and being part of his body. So at the end of it says, and having come, he brought as good news, peace or shalom to you who were far off, and peace to those near. So those who were far off were the house of Israel. They were the ones who were divorced by Yahuwah, and they were sent out among the Gentiles, and they became Gentiles. Those who were near, of course, were the house of Judah. Because through him, we both have access to the Father by one Spirit. And if you don't know what this is talking about, when you read it, you can kind of be like, okay, well, we've both got access to the Father, those who are near, those who are far off. I kind of got a general idea of what those words mean. When somebody is far off, maybe they're far off from God. Somebody who's near, somebody who's close to God, and kind of get an understanding of what's being said. But unless we actually understand certain things in Scripture, when we read this, if we use the general idea of the words that we have, we come to completely different conclusions about what it's saying than if we actually understand what it's saying. And obviously a lot of scriptures like that. The tabernacle itself is like that. When we think of animal sacrifices, we can think of, the pagans going around, maybe the Mayans sacrificing people or sacrifices being made to God. So we can get completely the wrong idea about it. The sacrifices that Yahuwah asks for when we understand Scripture are to make things holy and to make things clean, because he is a holy God. He's outside of the earth, outside of that element of creation. Obviously, he manifests in the temple which is in heaven. If he wants to come to the earth where there's all sorts of corruption, it needs to be prepared in a way which makes that place clean for him. So if we don't understand that, we can hear that he wants us to offer animals to him, and we think, that just sounds bizarre. I've got a complete other context for what that is. But anyway, those who are far off, those who were near, both have access to the Father by one Spirit. So this is talking about in the Spirit. It says, so then you are no longer strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens. Because as Gentiles, we weren't citizens of the Commonwealth of Israel. Okay, we had nothing to do with Israel. But now, we're no longer strangers from Israel. We're no longer foreigners. We're all a part of Israel. But fellow citizens with the set-apart ones, that is the holy ones, those who have been set apart, and of the household of Elohim, which is the temple, or the house of God, if you like. Having been built upon the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Yeshua Messiah himself being chief cornerstone. So he is described as the cornerstone of the temple, and he's also the head of the body, okay, from which all growth is from. In whom all the building being joined together grows into a set-apart dwelling place in Yahuwah. So again, this dwelling place is the place where Elohim chooses to dwell. He chose to dwell physically. He was actually there, in other words, in the earthly tabernacle. He was in the most holy part of the tabernacle, often called the Holy of Holies, sometimes called things like the most holy place or the most set apart place. The tabernacle itself, the tent which they'll be told to construct, was the holy place. And then within that, within this holy zone, which was kind of carved out in physical creation for the Creator to dwell in, there was a part of that which was behind a veil, which was the Holy of Holies, or the most holy place. And that's where he actually manifests. We are a dwelling place because his Spirit comes to dwell in us. That's not him physically coming to dwell in us, okay? That's his Spirit. So we've got, in terms of the Spirit, we've got him dwelling in heaven, okay? And we've got him dwelling on the earth. In heaven, he dwells as the Father. He is the Father in heaven. On the earth, he came and dwelt in the Mishkan. But he comes and he dwells in us. We are the dwelling place of Yahuwah in the Spirit. Not physically, but his Spirit dwells in us. In whom you also are being built together into a dwelling of Elohim in the Spirit. So this is describing the house of Israel and the house of Judah, those who are far off, those who are near, all coming together to form a dwelling place of Yahuwah, because his Spirit comes to dwell in them all. Zechariah was a prophecy about this. You can appreciate when this prophecy was given to the people who were reading this prophecy, they would be thinking something along the lines of, well, there's going to be a temple in the future, and this person is going to build this temple. We've got a temple now, but obviously that must be destroyed, or another temple is going to be built, or something like that. They wouldn't have understood properly what this was describing, but we know what it's describing. It's what Ephesians 2 is describing. And she'll speak to him, saying, thus said Yahuwah Zevaot, saying, see the man whose name is the branch, Hanetzer, Yeshua, and from his place he shall branch out, and he shall build the temple of Yahuwah. So again, here, they wouldn't have known what this was describing. They certainly wouldn't know that the temple was a dwelling place in the Spirit that was being spoken of, that this branch, who they probably would have recognized as being the Messiah, was going to build. You know, who knows what they thought was going to happen to the temple that they had, or what the future held. It is he who is going to build the temple of Yahuwah. It is he who is going to bear the splendor, and he shall sit and rule on his throne. Okay, so at the moment we know that he's on the throne in heaven, and he's a high priest in the heavenly tabernacle. The tabernacle which was built on the earth, they were told, okay, or Moshe was told, I want you to build this according to the pattern that I show you. And that pattern is the heavenly tabernacle. So having seen the heavenly tabernacle, he was to build, if you like, a replica of it on the earth. It was built after that pattern. Okay, so it's Yeshua who's going to build the temple of Yahuwah. It's he who's going to bear the splendor. He shall sit and rule on his throne. He shall be a priest on his throne. So Yeshua in the heavenly tabernacle is sitting on his throne, and he's a priest. The council of peace shall be between them both. They wouldn't have known who them both was at the time, but of course we know. While the crown is for a remembrance in the temple of Yahuwah to Chelem, and to Toviah, and to Yediah, and to Chain, son of Zephaniah, and to those who are far away, shall come and build the temple of Yahuwah. They may well have recognized that those who are far away were the house of Israel. Now they're told those who are far away will come and build the house of Yahuwah, the temple of Yahuwah. I don't actually know whether Zephaniah was before or after Ezekiel. But Ezekiel was told during the Babylonian captivity that the house of Israel, who were those who were far off, the term the house of Israel, were going to have this temple. So if Zechariah was after Ezekiel, maybe they would have thought, well, that's the temple in Ezekiel 40 through 48. That's the one that's being spoken of here, and it's the branch who's going to build it. But we know that it was the house of Israel, building it in the spirit. We know that from Ephesians. Those who are far off and those who are near are built into a temple, of which Messiah is the head. So Messiah builds the temple and is in fact the chief cornerstone of the temple. Those who are far away shall come and build the temple of Yahuwah, and you shall know that Yahuwah Sevaot has sent me to you. And this shall be if you diligently obey the voice of Yahuwah your Elohim. So they didn't know what this was a prophecy of. We know what it's a prophecy of now. It's us being built into the house of Yahuwah. 1 Peter 2:4-5 says, drawing near to him, a living stone, in fact, the chief cornerstone, rejected indeed by men, but chosen by Elohim and precious. You also as living stones, so he's the chief cornerstone and we're living stones, are built up a spiritual house. Okay, so this temple isn't a real bricks and mortar temple on the earth. It's in the spirit. That's how we're built together. Him chief cornerstone, us as spiritual stones, living stones rather, being built up into a spiritual house. A set-apart priesthood to offer up spiritual sacrifices acceptable to Elohim through Yeshua Messiah. So we're built into this temple, and in this temple as his body, we offer spiritual sacrifices, which I'm sure either Charlie or I will get into at some point as we go through the book of Leviticus, possibly towards the end of Exodus. Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, this is the beginning of the Torah portion, saying, speak to the children of Yisrael that they take up a terumah for me, a contribution or maybe an offering. The word terumah comes from the word room. Terumah is the noun form, the name of what you are doing when you do the verb. You room something, and to room something is to lift it up. So a contribution, an offering, is that which is lifted up to Yahuwah. Take up a contribution for me from everyone whose heart moves him. This is the same for building the temple of Yahuwah in the spirit. Those people who are going to make contributions towards the temple made in the spirit are those people whose hearts moved them. Those people who have the Torah written on their heart, for example. And you shall take up my contribution. It's the same as the principle that Paul draws on. He says, let each one give as he purposes in his heart. We see Yahuwah explain that principle to Moses. He says, go and take a contribution. And he says, go and get gold, silver, and bronze to build my dwelling place. And he says, let it be whoever's heart moves them. Paul tells us the same thing, of course. Everything that Paul writes is in fact from the Torah at some point or another. It can sometimes be challenging to find where it is in the Torah that it comes from, but there's much benefit to doing that. Let each one give as he purposes in his heart, not of grief or necessity, for Elohim loves a joyous giver. This is what he wanted at this point. He said, go and take a contribution from them, but let everyone bring as they purpose in their own heart. And of course, what they were building was the temple or the dwelling place of Yahuwah. Now that we're the dwelling place of Yahuwah in the spirit, the contributions that are brought to build the spiritual house are the same as everyone purposes in their heart. Are you somebody who wants to serve Yahuwah in the spirit in his temple? Exodus 12:35 tells us where they got these things from. The children of Israel had done according to the word of Moshe. They had asked from the Mitzrayite objects of silver, objects of gold, and garments. So where did they have material? Where did they have silver, gold, all the things that they needed to build the tabernacle from? I would suggest this is where a lot of it was from. Verse 3 says, this is the contribution which you take up from them, gold, silver, and bronze. Okay, so these things, when we're reckoning that we are the spiritual house of Yahuwah, these things are important because these are things with which we, as his spiritual house, as his dwelling place, are to be comprised of. gold, silver, and bronze. 2 Timothy 2:19-21 says, however, this solid foundation of Elohim stands firm, having this seal, Yahuwah knows those who are his. Doesn't mean that they don't have free will. They can make their own choices, but Yahuwah knows who will make the choice to be his. And let everyone who names the name of Messiah turn away from unrighteousness. But in a large house, there are not only vessels of gold and silver, but also of wood and clay. And of all those vessels, there are some vessels for honor and some vessels for dishonor. If then anyone cleanses himself from these matters, he shall be a vessel unto honor, having been set apart of good use to the master. So we want to be of good use to the Lord, or to the master of Yahuwah. So we're to cleanse ourselves. Okay, we can do that by making atonement in the spirit with spiritual sacrifices. Again, we'll get into all of that. I'm not going to lay it all out at the beginning before we even get to those verses. But if you go back and you watch those previous Torah portions, if you are interested. Okay, so if anyone cleanses himself from these matters, he shall be a vessel unto honor, having been set apart, good use to the master, having been prepared for every good work. And we know from Romans 9 that the potter, the creator, has authority over the clay, us, from the same lump to make one vessel for honor and another vessel for dishonor. Okay, so Yahuwah has prepared all the vessels. He's prepared some people knowing that they would choose well and that they would be vessels for honor in his house. And he's prepared other people knowing that they will choose poorly for dishonor. And he has the authority to do that. In 1 Chronicles 29, 1-2, we read, and David, the king, said to all the assembly, my son Shlomo, the one whom Elohim has chosen. David was a man of war. He was not suitable to build the dwelling place of Yahuwah. So his son was chosen to build the temple. He's young and tender, and the work is great because the palace is not for man, but for Yahuwah Elohim. So again, when Solomon, or Shlomo, as it is in the Hebrew, when he built the temple, it was for the same purpose. It was as a dwelling place for Yahuwah. The original tabernacle, they didn't use anymore. So a temple was built that Yahuwah could dwell in. The pattern was shown to David, and Solomon built the temple. Again, it was patterned after the temple that is in the heavens. With all my power, I have prepared for the house of my Elohim, the gold for the gold, silver for the silver, the bronze for the bronze, iron for the iron, the wood for the wood, showing stones and settings, and fair stones of various colors, all kinds of precious stones, and marble slabs in large quantities. Okay, so all of these things were vessels for honor to be used in Yahuwah's house, in his dwelling place. And we as his body comprise similar things. So just to briefly outline, this is how the Bible, in order from top to bottom, how it reckons metals: gold, silver, bronze, iron, wood, stones. And we see that in Isaiah 60 verse 17. Instead of bronze, I bring gold. So which one's the better one? It's gold. Instead of iron, I bring silver, and bronze instead of wood, iron instead of stones, and I shall make your officers peace and your magistrates righteousness. We see this reckoning of kind of the order in which these things go throughout Scripture. Daniel 2:36-39. This is the dream and its interpretation we declare before the king. You, O king, are a king of kings, for the Elah of the heavens has given you a kingdom, power, and strength, and glory. Now, when these things are being explained, this is all in terms of the kingdom of men. The word used for glory here, for example, isn't kavod. It's not like the glory of God, but it is esteem. It is glory. So this is glory, strength, a kingdom, power in terms of in the realm of men. And Nebuchadnezzar, it's going to be explained, as the head of gold, and he's going to be the best kingdom, basically, the head of gold. Wherever the children of men dwell, or the beasts of the field and the birds of the heavens, he has given them into your hand and has made you ruler over them all. You are the head of gold. And we've got the torso and the arms of silver. And we've got this part is made of bronze, and the legs were made of iron and clay. Okay? It says, and after you rises up another kingdom. It says that kingdom is inferior to yours. And being inferior, what's it made out of? It's made of silver. So we see this pattern all throughout Scripture. A third kingdom of bronze that rules over all the earth. I find it interesting that these are kingdoms in the realm of men. Okay, it's not Yahuwah's kingdom. Okay. Nebuchadnezzar, who was not one of Yahuwah's people, is the head of gold. And then we've got all of these kingdoms of men after it, and they're inferior kingdoms. But then the thing which comes to destroy them, and I'm not saying this is how Yahuwah intended this, it's just how it strikes me. The thing that destroys them is the thing which is reckoned of least worth. It's stone. The stone comes and strikes the feet of the statue and destroys all of these kingdoms of men. So you've got all of these things which seem to have glory in terms of men. Gold, silver, bronze, and then iron and clay of less value. But then the thing which destroys them is the thing which men would ascribe the least value to. It's the stone. And that actually turns out to be the thing of most value. So this is in the kingdoms of men, how this imagery is explained. But in terms of what Yahuwah wants in his house, he has the same reckoning: gold, silver, bronze, etc. 1 Corinthians 12:22-24 says, but much rather, those members of the body which are thought to be weaker are necessary. Okay? It's very interesting what Paul explains here. Those of the body which we think to be unhonored, which is a real word, this is probably the best word to use there, unhonored, to these we confer greater honor, and our unseemly members have greater seemliness. Whereas our seemly members have no need, but Elohim blended together the body, having given greater honor to that member which lacks it. So in Elohim's body, in his temple, in the spirit, what he's done is he has put the people in the body that he wants in the body, so that all of the body works together, so that nobody is taking the greater esteem, if you like it, or the greater honor. All are one body together and are to function as one body. So Elohim's blended together the body, having given greater honor to that member which lacks it. Why? Because they're a part of the body. Nobody is above anyone else in the body. You have people who are leaders who make decisions in the body, but that doesn't mean that anybody is above anybody else. Everybody is the body, and Messiah is the head. And through doing that, Elohim has given equal honor, if you like, to all, because all are the body. 1 Corinthians 15:41 says, one esteem of the sun, another esteem of the moon, another esteem of the stars, for star differs from star in esteem. But you know what you can't do if you're the moon? You can't do what the stars do. Okay? If you are a star, you can't do what the moon does. If you're the sun, you can't do what the moon does. And if you're the moon, you can't do what the sun does. All have different esteem, but all are necessary. Matthew 23:11-12 says, the greatest among you shall be your servant. Okay, so the way that man reckons things, like when we were looking at the kingdom of man a second ago, man would think, well, the one being served is the one who is the greatest. Well, that's the flip side is true. Yeshua being the stone, for example. The greatest among you shall be your servant, and whoever exalts himself shall be humbled, and whoever humbles himself shall be exalted. Okay, so in the body, the greatest, the one who Yahuwah reckons of esteem, is the one who serves other people. 1 Kings 10:21 says, all the drinking vessels of King Shlomo were of gold, and all the vessels of the house of the forest of Lebanon were of refined gold. And refined gold's quite interesting, but maybe we'll look at that another time. Not of silver, for this was reckoned of little value in the days of Shlomo. Okay, so each of us as gold, silver, whatever it is, will be refined. Okay, so we'll look at the concept of being refined in the context of us being part of this temple in the Spirit. Ezekiel 22:17-31 says, and the word of Yahuwah came to me, saying, Son of man, the house of Israel has become dross to me. All of them are bronze and tin and iron and lead in the midst of a furnace. They have become the dross of silver. Okay, dross of silver, as you probably know, is when you refine silver, when you melt it down, what rises to the surface, all of the impurities. Therefore, thus said the Master Yahuwah, because all of you have become dross, therefore, see, I am gathering you into the midst of Jerusalem. And we're going to see the way that Yahuwah refines his people who have become as dross. I think that most of us recognize that a large portion of Yahuwah's people today have become as dross. Okay? As they gather silver and bronze and iron and lead and tin into the midst of a furnace to blow fire on it to melt it, so I gather you in my displeasure and my wrath, and I shall blow and melt you. Okay, and we're going to see something similar to this in the future. And I shall gather you and blow on you with the fire of my wrath, and you shall be melted in its midst. As silver is melted in the midst of a furnace, so are you melted in its midst. And you shall know that I, Yahuwah, have poured out my wrath on you. And the word of Yahuwah came to me, saying, Son of man, say to her, you are a land that is not cleansed or rained upon in the day of displeasure. There is a conspiracy of her prophets in our midst, like a roaring lion tearing the prey. They have devoured life. They have taken wealth and precious matters. They have made many widows in her midst, because they didn't teach the people accordingly. They didn't teach them Yahuwah's ways, and so they became as dross of silver to Yahuwah. Her priests have done violence to my Torah, and they profane my set-apart matters. This is exactly what most of the religious leaders in the world are like today. They don't teach the difference between clean and unclean or any of those things. They don't teach what is pleasing to Yahuwah. They've done violence to the Torah. They've not distinguished between the set-apart or the holy and profane, nor have they made known the difference between the unclean and the clean. So certain things are to be set apart. Certain things are to be counted as profane. Certain things are clean, certain things are unclean. But today, most things of this teaching have been forgotten about. Okay, it's all kind of feel-good lessons about, oh, this is a situation that rose last Sunday after I'd finished church. I was driving home, and then I had this thought, and it made me think, oh, what would Jesus do in that situation? And it just becomes a nonsense. And they have hidden their eyes from my Sabbaths, and I am profaned in their midst. Okay, so we've got all this false religiosity being taught in Yahuwah's name. They don't keep the Sabbath, they don't do this, and they don't do that. And this has always been the case. That there was always a remnant who would do these things, but the majority of people were taught by people like this, people who did violence to the Torah. Her leaders in her midst are like wolves tearing the prey, to shed blood, to destroy lives, and to get greedy gain, another apt description. And her prophets have coated them with whitewash, seeing a false vision and divining a lie for them, saying, thus said the Master Yahuwah, when Yahuwah had not spoken. So rather than teach the people properly, what they did is they put whitewash on the people and they said, oh no, it's all going to be fine. You know, Jesus loves you, and as long as Jesus loves you, then this is going to be okay. You don't have to worry about following the Old Testament, or you don't need to worry about this, you don't need to worry about that. Just be the people of Jesus. People of Jesus, you're going to be okay. The same is true in the Torah movement. Okay, you think in the Torah movement, you get people teaching the Torah. However, you don't get that. What you get is people who focus on all the wrong things, who don't make the distinction between the holy and the profane to people. Things like not making a difference between the scriptures and the book of Enoch, or the scriptures and the book of Jasher. They don't make a distinction between them, between the clean and the unclean, and they teach lies, and they kind of put a whitewash over everything, and it's, oh, don't worry, the Messiah is going to come and punish all these wicked people anytime soon. Well, you don't need to worry about that, because you acknowledge the Torah and you acknowledge Yeshua. So you always get these false prophets, these false leaders leading his people astray. And he refines his people in this condition because Yahuwah is compassionate and he's merciful. He doesn't just want to come to the people and say, oh no, all of that's garbage, so all of you can do one. You know, Yahuwah wants to come and he wants his people to turn to him and be cleansed and be saved if they have it in their hearts to follow after him. So in his mercy, Yahuwah brings trial, and he brings rebuke upon people. The people of the land have practiced oppression and committed robbery and have wronged the poor and needy. They oppress the stranger without mishpat. Okay, what Charlie was looking at last week, his mishpatim, his justices. And I sought for a man among them who would make a wall and stand in the breach before me on behalf of the land, that I should not destroy it, but I did not find one. Therefore I have poured out my displeasure on them. I have consumed them with the fire of my wrath, and I've put their way on their own head, declares the Master Yahuwah. But when he does this, and when he does it in the future, it will be to bring the people who are going to come to a recognition of him to repentance. In Ezekiel 24 we read, therefore thus said the Master Yahuwah, woe to the city of blood. Let me also make the pile great. Heap on the wood, kindle the fire, cook the meat well, mixing in the spices, and let the bones be burned up. Set it on the coals, empty, so that it gets hot, and its bronze glows, and its filthiness shall be melted in it, and its rust be consumed. She has wearied herself with sorrows, and her great rust has not gone from her into the fire with her rust. In your filthiness is wickedness, because I have cleansed you, but you are not clean. You shall not be cleansed of your filthiness anymore till I have caused my fire to rest upon you. It reminds me of Hebrews 10 when it talks about, if you sin willingly after you have received the knowledge of the truth, there is no more sacrifice for sins. Because I have cleansed you, but you are not clean, you shall not be cleansed of your filthiness anymore. Kind of what I was talking about in Torah portion Bo as well, about when he will actually make people's hearts hard against him. Okay, because I've cleansed you, but you're not clean, I'm not going to cleanse you anymore till I've caused my wrath to rest upon you. That's it now. I, Yahuwah, have spoken, it shall come and I shall do it. I do not hold back, nor do I pardon, nor do I relent. According to your ways and according to your deeds, they shall judge you, declares the Master Yahuwah. In Revelation 3:14-19, we read this. To the angel of the assembly in Laodicea write that Amen, the trustworthy, the true witness, the beginning of the creation of Elohim, says this. I know your works, that you are neither cold, and that word is suchos, nor hot, which is zestos. I would that you were cold or hot. And kind of when we read this, we can think, oh, it's about being on fire for God, being hot for God. And we can kind of get a rough approximation of what it's talking about. But these terms are actually terms which are used of water. Okay, when you use the word suchos, it is a term used of water. Zestos is kind of boiling hot, and it's used of water. And water that is cold is refreshing and it is useful. Water that is hot had a use also, of course. You can bathe in water that is hot. However, water that is only tepid or lukewarm is of no use. So because you are lukewarm, cheiros, which is another term obviously to do with water, and are neither cold nor hot, I am going to vomit you out of my mouth. Okay, so this should bring, images of, if you want a nice cold drink and you take a big swig of lukewarm water, it's not going to be nice. These people are of no use. They're neither cold nor are they hot. They're lukewarm, which lukewarm water is good for nothing. Because you say, rich I am, and I am made rich, and need none at all, do not know that you are wretched and pitiable and poor and blind and naked. I advise you to buy from me gold refined in the fire. Okay, fire is associated with trial, okay, with difficulties, with tribulation, so that you become rich, and white garments, so that you become dressed, so that the shame of your nakedness might not be shown, and anoint your eyes with ointment, so that you see. Okay, so these people are advised, repent. Okay, repent, so that you will be hot or you'll be cold. You will be of use. In other words, all of the letters to the churches are all to assemblies that are in different positions, and you can look at all of them and you can see all of the different people that are believers today, either in the Christian church or in the Torah movement. You can see the problems that manifest in people have been the same since the beginning, and they're identified in these letters. So these people who are lukewarm, they're not useful for anything. Yeshua says, as many as I love, I reprove and discipline. So be ardent and repent. Okay, I counsel of you to buy of me gold refined in the fire. So what these people are told is that you people are of no use. What's going to need to happen is the trial will come upon you. We look at that in an end times context, as we will in a second. That will be the hour of trial which will come upon the whole earth. Therefore, thus said Yahuwah Sevaot, see, I refine them and shall try them. For what shall I do because of the daughter of my people? So it's just been in Jeremiah that he's described the terrible state that these people are in. And this is what Yahuwah does. He says, I'll refine them and I'll try them. In Psalm 66, verse 10, for you, O Elohim, have proved us. All of this talk of proving, of trying something in order to prove it. You have refined us as silver is refined. And this sort of imagery is used all the way throughout the scriptures. Take away the dross from the silver, and a vessel comes forth for the refiner. Okay, if we think of it in the terms of what Paul was saying in 2 Timothy, the vessels, some of which are used for dishonor, some of which are for honor. You want to be a vessel for honor, you take away the dross. You're refined, it takes away the dross, and a vessel comes forth for the refiner, for Yahuwah. He is the refiner. Proverbs 17 verse 3 says, a refining pot is for silver and a furnace for gold, but Yahuwah tries the hearts. So this is what is being imagined or pictured here in this idea of us being tried as silver or tried as gold. What is being tried here is our hearts. We've got a refining pot for silver, a furnace for gold. We actually understand those things on the earth, but the thing that Yahuwah is proving, the thing that he is trying, is our hearts. Deuteronomy 8:2-3 says, and you shall remember that Yahuwah your Elohim led you all the way these 40 years in the wilderness to humble you, to prove you, to know what is in your heart, whether you guard his commands or not. So if you're in a position where you're suffering hunger, as they were, and you've got a choice between suffer hunger and do his commands, or gratify your flesh and don't do his commands, that's Yahuwah trying your heart. And he humbled you, and he let you suffer hunger, and he fed you with manna, which you did not know, nor did your fathers know, to make you know that a man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of Yahuwah. So he tried them, and then what did he do? He provided for them exactly what they needed in that position, but he tried their hearts so that he knew whether they would keep his commands or not. Psalm 26 says, "Judge me, O Yahuwah, for I have walked in my integrity, and I have trusted in Yahuwah without wavering. Examine me, O Yahuwah, and prove me. Try my kidneys and my heart." So again, picture we've got is trying silver or gold like we would and removing the dross from it. That's what Yahuwah does with our inward parts. 1 Thessalonians 2 verse 4 says, "But as we have been approved by Elohim to be entrusted with the good news." Okay, that's an interesting concept. We've been approved by him. We've been tried. We've been approved, trusted with good news. So we speak not as pleasing men, but as pleasing Elohim, who proves our hearts. He tests our hearts, as silver and gold is tested. 1 Peter 1, 6-7 says, "In which you exult, even though for a little while, if need be, you have been grieved by manifold trials, in order that the proving of your faith, much more precious than gold that perishes and proven by fire, might be found to result in praise and respect and esteem at the revelation of Yeshua Messiah." So this happens to us individually in our lives. It also happens to his body, okay? And each of the assemblies in Revelation who are written to with the specific problems that they have, the way that they respond is the amount of trial that they will go through, both in terms of us appreciating that in our personal lives and also in the future, at the time of the end. Revelation 3, 10-12 says, "And to the angel of the assembly in Philadelphia write, he who is set apart, he who is true, he who has the key of David, he who opens and no one shuts, and shuts and no one opens, says this, I know your works. See, I have set before you an open door. No one is able to shut it. That you have little power, yet have guarded my word and have not denied my name." So this is the best assembly that is written to. Okay, I know your works. This is what you do. You've guarded my word. You've not denied my name. See, I'm giving up those of the congregation of Hasatan who say they are Jews and are not, but lie. See, I am making them come and worship before your feet, and to know that I have loved you. Okay? Those people who say that they're believers, but their hearts are not circumcised. Okay, a Jew is not one who is one outwardly. You can be outwardly a believer in Yahuwah, but it's actually the one whose circumcision is inward in the heart. Because you have guarded my word of endurance, I also shall guard you from the hour of trial, which shall come upon all the world to try those who dwell on the earth. So who are the ones who are tried? Okay, we see it throughout Scripture. I'm going to gather all of you wrongdoers into the midst of Jerusalem, and I'm going to pour out my wrath on you, when they were living in the land of Israel. Here, we've got the people who are going to be guarded instead of tried. There's going to be an hour of trial which comes upon the whole earth to try those who dwell on the earth. Okay, why does he try them? In order that their faith might be found to esteem and honor and praise at the revelation of Yeshua. Again, he's not doing it just because he wants to be cruel to people. He's doing it to get them to repent, the proving of their faith. So certain people during this time will go through that. Other people will not need to. Okay, and that's true in our personal lives, and it will be true in the future also. He who overcomes, I shall make him a supporting post in the dwelling place of my Elohim, in the temple, a supporting post. Okay? So we've been looking at us as gold, silver, whatever it is, that we will be refined. These people, okay, the overcomers, they will be these elements in the dwelling place. Again, the dwelling place is mentioned, us as his dwelling place in the Spirit. And he shall by no means go out, and I shall write upon him the name of my Elohim and the name of the city of my Elohim, the new Jerusalem, which comes down out of the heaven from my Elohim, and my new name. And we're going to see the name of the city, and we're going to see New Jerusalem in part 3 when we get there. But to have the name of Elohim written on you is to guard his commandments. It's not to have a physical name written upon you. It is his character, it's his authority, it's who he is that is written upon you. Revelation 7:9-15 says, after this I looked, and I saw a great crowd, which no one was able to count, out of all nations and tribes and peoples and tongues, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, dressed in white robes and palm branches in their hands, crying out with a loud voice, saying, deliverance or salvation belongs to our Elohim who sits on the throne and to the Lamb. And all the angels stood around the throne, and the elders and the 4 living creatures, and fell on their faces before the throne and worshipped Elohim, saying, Amen, the blessing and the esteem and the wisdom and the thanksgiving and the respect and the power and the might to our Elohim forever and ever. Amen. And one of the elders responded and said to me, who are these dressed in white robes, and where did they come from? Okay, these are the people who were guarding the commandments of Elohim from the beginning, the ones who were guarded from that hour of trial. And I said to him, Master, you know. And he said to me, these are those coming out of the great tribulation. Okay, this great trial, this hour of trial, which is going to come on the whole earth. These are the ones who are going to come out of that, having washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. So these are people who are going to come to repentance during this time of trial, because again, that's what it's in order to do. It's to get them into a position where they can be a part of the dwelling place of Elohim in the Spirit. Because of this, they are before the throne of Elohim and serve him day and night in his dwelling place, the one in heaven. He who sits on the throne shall spread his tent over them, which I believe is a reference to them being in the Spirit, part of the dwelling place of Elohim. Spreading his tent, this is the tabernacle, this is the tent that we're going to learn of as we go forward. Now in Numbers 14:33-35, we bear in mind where spiritual stones were built up into a spiritual house. Yahuwah spoke to Moshe and to Aharon, saying, when you come into the land of Canaan, which I am giving you as a possession, and I put a plague of Sara'at in the house in the land of your possession, then the one who owns the house come and inform the priest, saying, it seems to me that there is some plague in the house. Okay, I'm going to explain this in more detail when we get to Torah portion Tazria and Metzorah. Sara'at was what Bibles commonly translate as leprosy. It wasn't leprosy, though. It wasn't Hansen's disease. It was something which was brought about, a condition brought about by the Spirit. We have these manifestations in the flesh of Sara'at now, and it is the leadership who are given knowledge of these things by Yahuwah in various ways. And all of this is here for us in the Torah. But to talk about the house of Yahuwah in particular, because it pertains to this. The one who owns the house, Yahuwah, shall come and inform the priest, the leader, saying, it seems to me there is some plague in the house, and it's a plague that he's put there. Later we read, the priest shall command, and they shall empty the house before the priest. He goes in to look at the plague, so that all in the house is not made unclean, because when there is a plague of Sara'at, and there's a spiritual problem in the house of Yahuwah, the danger is that that spiritual problem in whoever it's in will spread to everyone. And after that, the priest goes in to look at the house, and he shall look at the plague and see if the plague is on the walls of the house with sunken places, greenish or reddish, these signs of the Sara'at, which appear to be deep in the wall. Then the priest shall go out of the house to the door of the house, shut up the house 7 days, and the priest shall come again on the 7th day and look and see if the plague is spread on the walls of the house. Basically, they're to come and look to see whether this is a problem which continues in the house, or whether it was just something that flared up in the flesh. Numbers 14:40-47 says, then the priest shall command, and they shall remove the stones with the plague in them. Okay, this is the job of the leader to do, to remove the stones in the house that have this spiritual problem. They look upon it to see whether it's a deep spiritual problem, whether it's just something that flared up in the flesh, whether it's something that continues. But if it continues, it's the job of the priest, those in leadership, to remove the stones with the plague in them and throw them outside the city into an unclean place. That's what Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians 5. He says, remove these people from among you. While he lets the house be scraped inside all around, and the dust that they scrape off, they shall pour out in the unclean place outside the city. So you take off any damage and you get rid of that as well. They shall take other stones and put them in place of those stones, and take out other mortar and plaster the house. And if the plague comes back and breaks out in the house after he's removed the stones, after he's scraped the house, and after it's plastered, if this is something which is taken hold in the house, the priest shall come and look and see if the plague is spread in the house. It is an active Sara'at in the house, and it is unclean. He shall break down the house, its stones and its timber, and all the plaster of the house, and he shall bring them outside the city to an unclean place. And he who goes into the house all the days while it is shut up becomes unclean until evening. He who lies down in the house has to wash his garments, and he who eats in the house has to wash his garments also. It's a serious problem when there is this spiritual Sara'at in the body of Messiah. I'll finish with this verse. Romans 8:29, because those whom he knew beforehand, he also ordained beforehand to be conformed to the likeness of his Son. Okay, he is the head, we are the body. We are conformed to him. You want to know if you're one of the ones who Yahuwah knew beforehand, one of the chosen? You look at yourself and you ask, am I conformed to the image of Yeshua? Or am I at least moving in that direction? For him to be the firstborn among many brothers, the chief cornerstone in the house. The context that I want to look at the temple in the future in is that there is going to be a point when animals will be offered to Yahuwah again. And kind of our understanding, as I alluded to at the beginning, of animal offerings is completely coming from the wrong perspective. And I spoke about the idea of the Melchizedek priesthood and all of that last time. And a part of that I've noticed is this idea that, well, Yeshua's sacrifice was a sacrifice once and for all. And then after that, we don't need any more sacrifices. And I can understand where people might get that from. But again, if we look at Scripture with a certain eye and we don't understand certain things, then when we read other things, we can come to the wrong conclusion. And that's what's happened with the book of Hebrews. So the idea that we very much have in the world at the moment is that, offering animals was the Old Testament, and that's something that's done away with now, and we don't do that. All this sort of idea. Okay? Christ's sacrifices and Old Testament fulfillment. Every priest stands daily ministering and offering time after time the same sacrifices which can never take away sins. But he, having offered one sacrifice for sins for all time, sat down at the right hand of God. And if that's the one snippet that you've got without any context, I can see where people get these ideas from, especially when, again, you've got leaders, priests, prophets of today who are like, okay, this is what this means. I'm not going to make the difference between the clean and the unclean, or the holy and the profane. Whereas his dwelling place is all about the difference between the clean and unclean, holy and profane. And this idea, you even get Torah keepers who've got this idea because in some way offering animals to Yahuwah leaves a bad taste in people's mouths. They just don't like it, and so people are kind of looking for an excuse of why we don't do that anymore. It's like, oh, no, don't worry about it. And that's really not a good way to comprehend these things, because these are the instructions of the Creator. We should be seeking to understand them rather than to put them under our moral judgment of those things. And it's a manifestation of this lie, which is a very popular lie in Christianity. It's a big part of the kind of the Melchizedek doctrine, that all of those laws were a punishment because of the golden calf. Now afterwards, we're in a Melchizedek covenant and we don't have to do them. But it's, as I say, it's even a part of the Torah movement. They would say, oh no, we do the Torah. And then if somebody says to them, well, what about animal sacrifice? And they say, oh no, Jesus fulfilled that. And it's like, how do you expect anybody to take serious what you're saying about the Torah still standing and not being fulfilled by Yeshua, if you're going to turn around and say, oh no, but that bit of the Torah, that was fulfilled by Yeshua, but that's the only bit. It loses any credibility. When you explain what these things actually are, what the Torah says about them, about it being for his dwelling place, being made holy and being cleansed, then these things make a proper sense. So in Genesis 8:20 to 21, it says, Noah built an altar to Yahuwah, and he took of every clean beast and of every clean bird, and he offered burnt offerings on the altar. And Yahuwah smelled a soothing fragrance, and Yahuwah said in his heart, never again shall I curse the ground because of man, although the inclination of man's heart is evil from his youth, and never again smite all living creatures as I have done. So he takes all of these creatures, he puts them all on a fire, and he burns them as a burnt offering to Yahuwah. And Yahuwah smelled a soothing fragrance, or a sweet savour. We'd have it in the King James. And yet somehow what is a sweet savour to Yahuwah has become a stench in the nostrils of his people. So this is really, really bad news. We've gone astray somewhere in understanding who Yahuwah is, what is pleasing to him, and we've kind of put it all under what is pleasing to us and our own morality. Isaiah 55, my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares Yahuwah. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. Charlie was talking about something very similar last week with the Mishpatim, with his justices. Okay, we might well think of what he says is just as unjust, but what we think doesn't matter. And the more that we can bring our reckoning in line with his reckoning, the better that will be. So when he says that these burnt offerings are a sweet savour to him, we should reckon with that, and we should try to understand it rather than try to dismiss it, especially try to dismiss it with his own word. So again, the letter that was written to the Hebrews, is our best piece of scripture, in my opinion, to understand exactly what is going on here. Again, the letter that was written to the Hebrews was trying to explain to them, as we saw a couple of weeks ago, how Yeshua could be high priest if he wasn't a Levite. And it's explaining to them that there was a temple on the earth, and that was built after the pattern that was shown to Moses, and that it was actually the heavenly temple, which was the pattern. So the heavenly temple pre-existed the earthly temple, and Yeshua serves in the heavenly temple. So what was written to the Hebrews is useful for our understanding too, because it's explaining those two systems parallel to each other. Hebrews 9, 1-10 says, "Now the first covenant indeed had regulations of worship and the earthly set-apart place." Okay, this line alone should tell us that the Melchizedek doctrine is a nonsense. What they say is, after they'd agreed the covenant, then it was the sin of the golden calf which brought about the temple worship, and that was nothing to do with the first covenant that they agreed to. Whereas what they actually say is, all that Yahuwah will say, or has said, as in future perfect, is going to say, all of that we will do. And then Yahuwah says to Moses, okay, come up now and I'm going to tell you the Torah. And pretty much the first thing that he tells Moses about, and the thing that he dwells on the most in the Torah, is the temple or the tabernacle, the animal offerings, all offerings that are made to him. Okay, all of those things. That's the very first thing that he tells Moses. And then the sin of the golden calf happens. But this tells us that the first covenant, which is the thing that they would contend is the only thing that we are to pay any attention to, indeed had regulations of worship in the earthly set-apart place. So it tells us right there that was part of the first covenant. For a tent was prepared, the first part, in which was the lampstand and the table and the showbread, which is called the set-apart or the holy place. So the main tent of the tabernacle, where you had the menorah, you had the table of showbread, you had the golden altar of incense, all of that was the holy place. And within that, you had a second curtain, a veil, inside of which was the most holy place, or the Holy of Holies, the bit that is set apart within the bit that's set apart of the set apart, if you like. After the second veil, the part of the tent which is called most set apart. So this is where Yahuwah was actually physically present. This is where he dwelt on the earth in the midst of his people, to which belong the golden censer and the Ark of the Covenant, overlaid on all sides with gold, in which were the golden pot that held the manna, and the rod of Aharon that budded, and the tablets of the covenant. So that's what you found within there. You found the golden censer in there on one day of the year, which was Yom Kippur. All the rest was perpetually there. And Yahuwah would appear above the mercy seat on the Ark of the Covenant. Above it, the cherubim of esteem, the cherubs of glory, were overshadowing the place of atonement. That's the mercy seat, about which we do not now speak in detail. These having been prepared like this, the priests always went into the first part of the tent, accomplishing the services. So the priests always went into the holy place. They were always allowed to go in there, but it was only on one day of the year that any of the priests, the high priest, was able to go into the most set-apart place. But into the second part, the high priest went alone once a year, not without blood, which he offered for himself and for sins of ignorance of the people. So in order for him to enter into there, he had to make an offering, and its blood cleansed him. The Holy Spirit is signifying this. So in this whole thing about the tent, the holy place, having the most set-apart place in the middle, and the priests can always go into the first set-apart place. This is what the Holy Spirit is signifying. That the way into the holy place has not yet been disclosed while the outer tent is still standing, which is a symbol for the present time. Okay, so the outer tent is a symbol for the present time which we all live in now. So the holy place has not yet been disclosed. The way into the most holy place has not yet been disclosed while the outer tent is still standing, which is a symbol for the present time. Accordingly, both gifts and sacrifices are offered, which is the correct tense. You might not find that in some translations. Are offered, which cannot make the worshipper perfect in conscience. So we touched on this a couple of weeks ago, but the way in which you can't be made perfect with offering an animal is in terms of your conscience. It can cleanse your flesh, just like the high priest had to offer for himself and the sins of ignorance of the people. So he could cleanse himself from that in terms of his flesh, but it didn't make him perfect in terms of his conscience. So accordingly, gifts and sacrifices are offered which cannot make the worshipper perfect in conscience, since they relate only to food and drink and various washings, regulations for the body or for the flesh, imposed until a time of reformation. And it's this time of reformation that we're going to look at in Ezekiel's temple. People, the common Christian understanding of this is that the time of Reformation was after Yeshua, after Jesus, okay? Problem is, that's never anything that the scriptures say. It's an assumption. So it goes along with the doctrine of, well, now Jesus has died, that was the once and for all sacrifice, that perfected us, we don't need the other sacrifices now. So that was the time of Reformation. And this is all put in a different tense. Sacrifices were offered until a time of Reformation is the tense that they put it into. Tense it's actually in, though, is it says that those things are offered until a time of Reformation. The word Reformation, okay, diorthosis, only used once in all of Scripture. In a physical sense, a making straight, restoring to its natural and normal condition, something which in some way protrudes or has gotten out of line as broken or misshapen limbs. So this reforming, it says here, of acts and institutions, a reformation of something. So you've got the tabernacle and the earthly service, okay, those things which cleanse the flesh. Those things in their present state are to be offered for the cleansing of the flesh until a time when everything will be put straight. Yeshua refers to this with the disciples, and he says, until the time of restoration would be a good translation of it. Okay, after he has returned, in other words. So there will be a time when all of those things, all of that temple service will be returned to how it would be normally. Because right now, things aren't as they will be in the millennium. So there will be a change. We will still have animals offered, but this whole system is going to be reformed in the millennium. 1 Corinthians 15, 47 to 49. It's interesting for us to consider. It says the first man, or the first Adam being the Hebrew for both the name Adam and mankind, Adam. The first man was of the earth, earthy. The second man is the master from heaven. Well, the first Adam was of the earth. The second Adam is the master from heaven. As is the earthy, so also are those who are earthy. As is the heavenly, so also are those who are heavenly. As we have borne the likeness of the earthy, we shall also bear the likeness of the heavenly. Okay, so when Yeshua was crucified, okay, his body was put in the tomb, didn't see corruption, his soul went to Sheol, and he was raised from the dead, and he had his resurrection body is the term that people use. Okay, the heavenly body, if you like. Now, I think that people, they kind of misunderstand what's going on in the millennium. I think this is something that I've been thinking about this week. Okay, we have all of these assumptions upon which we build everything. And we think, well, we're going to be in our heavenly body in the millennium. So we're not going to need sacrifices to be made for the cleansing of the flesh, because we're not going to be flesh anymore. We're going to be spirit. Okay, and that kind of makes sense. But the terms flesh and spirit are used variously throughout Scripture. You have your flesh as opposed to your spirit. You have the lusts of the flesh and the desires of your spirit. And we've got things that are in the body, and we've got things that are a spirit. But we don't want to confuse our spirit with a spirit. Okay? 1 Corinthians 15:26-40 says, "Senseless one, what you sow is not made alive unless it dies. And as to what you sow, you do not sow the body which is to be, but a bare grain. It might be wheat or some other grain. But Elohim gives it a body as he wishes, and to each seed a body of its own. All flesh is not the same flesh, but there is one flesh of men, another flesh of beasts, another of fishes, another of birds. And there are heavenly bodies and earthly bodies." So they're not the same flesh. Okay, our earthly body and our heavenly body, though. But what is being said here, to my eye, is that they are both flesh. All flesh is not the same flesh. There are heavenly bodies and there are earthly bodies. Okay, so when we have our heavenly body, the assumption is that it will be some kind of body made of spirit, which is not what the Scriptures say. Okay, the Scriptures say it will be a heavenly body. We will be in a body living in the kingdom. So the assumption that no sacrifices will be necessary for us because we are spirits is not an assumption which we get from Scripture. It's just one of those assumptions which we have. Now, I'm not saying that it will definitely be different, that we will definitely need sacrifices. What I'm saying is it is not omitted from that. We do see a temple in the midst of the children of Israel during the millennium. Okay, and we do see them entering it to bring offerings. The assumption that we have is that that won't be us. What I'm saying is that's not a sound assumption to make. It could well be a false assumption. All flesh is not the same flesh. There are heavenly bodies and there are earthly bodies. That seems pretty straightforward to me. The sacrifices are for the cleansing of the flesh. But all flesh is not the same, and our heavenly bodies may well need sacrifices for the cleansing of their flesh. Not saying that's definitely the case, just saying that's an assumption which is worth questioning. 1 Corinthians 15 also says, "This I say, brothers, the flesh and blood is unable to inherit the kingdom of Elohim, neither does corruption inherit incorruption." So our earthly bodies are flesh and blood. Flesh and blood is not able to enter the kingdom. "See, I speak a secret to you. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed. In a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet, for the trumpet shall sound, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. For this corruptible has to put on incorruption, this mortal to put on immortality." The heavenly body is what he's speaking about in context here. When this corruptible is put on incorruption and this mortal is put on immortality, then shall come to be the word that has been written, "Death is swallowed up in overcoming." And I've touched on this before, this idea that when death is swallowed up, that nothing will die. Okay, or is that type of death to do with corruption? Is that something different? Is that another false assumption which we have picked up from Christianity or from wherever else? Luke 24:36-39, after Yeshua has been resurrected, as the first fruits of the resurrection, which we've just read about the resurrection, we will be resurrected, and those who are alive will be changed and will receive heavenly bodies. Yeshua was the first fruits of this. As they were saying this, Yeshua himself stood in the midst of them and said to them, "Peace to you." And being startled and frightened, they thought they had seen a spirit. Okay, again, difference between a spirit and heavenly body. He said to them, "Why are you troubled? And why do doubts arise in your hearts? See my hands and my feet, that it is I myself. Handle me and see, for a spirit does not have flesh and bones, as you see I have." So his resurrection body was flesh and bone. Okay, flesh and blood, that which is kept alive by the blood, will not inherit the kingdom. Yeshua was flesh and bone. We are going to receive a body. We're going to have hands and feet and heads and all the rest of it. Perhaps we will be flesh and bones as well, and perhaps our flesh will need to be cleansed. It's possible. Saying this, he showed them his hands and his feet. So Yeshua, in his resurrection or his heavenly body, has flesh. Hebrews 9:11-14. But when Messiah appeared, and that's the same body he ascended to heaven, and the same body he's in heaven with, and the same body he'll come down from heaven with. When Messiah appeared as a high priest of the good things to come, he entered through the great and more perfect tabernacle, not made with hands, that is to say, not of this creation, the earth. That is the heavenly tabernacle. And not through the blood of goats and calves, but through his own blood. He entered the holy place once for all, having obtained eternal redemption. For if the blood of goats and bulls and the ashes of a heifer, sprinkling those who have been defiled, sanctify for the cleansing of the flesh, in other words, those things which are done on the earth are for the cleansing of the flesh, how much more shall the blood of Messiah, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without blemish to Elohim, cleanse your conscience from dead works to serve the living Elohim? So, what it's saying is you've got one system on earth, that's for the cleansing of your flesh, and then you've got what Messiah was doing in heaven, and that's for the cleansing of your conscience. And he's explaining, the author of Hebrews is explaining to the Hebrews, those sacrifices that you're offering in the earthly temple, they can't perfect you. They're only for the cleansing of your flesh, so that you can have Yahuwah dwell in your midst, so that your flesh is clean. The blood of Messiah is necessary because those offerings cannot perfect you. The blood of Messiah is necessary to perfect you as pertains to the conscience. Okay, so you need the heavenly and you need the earthly. One for the flesh, one for the conscience. If you're only going to have one, the heavenly is the one that you would have. Hebrews 9:19-24 says, "And when according to Torah every command had been spoken by Moshe to all the people, he took the blood of calves and goats with water and scarlet wool and hyssop and sprinkled both the book itself and all the people, saying, 'This is the blood of the covenant which Elohim commanded you.' And in the same way he sprinkled with blood both the tent and all the vessels of the service. And according to the Torah, almost all is cleansed with blood, and without shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness." So this is why animal sacrifices are needed, because those things are cleansed with blood, because we have a holy, eternal creator who wants to come and dwell with his people. But there's only one thing which will make the people clean and will make the things clean in order for him to be able to dwell in creation, and that's blood. It was necessary then that the copies of the heavenly ones, okay, those things on earth that were copied after the heavenly ones, should be cleansed with these, but the heavenly ones themselves were better sacrifices with these. What was the better sacrifice? Obviously, it was Yeshua. It was Yeshua's blood that was necessary to cleanse those things in the heavenly tabernacle. So here on earth, we cleanse for the things here on earth. In heaven, you cleanse with Yeshua's blood, the better sacrifices, the heavenly tabernacle. For us, we make spiritual sacrifices, as we read before, And that makes atonement for our spirits, which is a cleansing of the spirit. For Messiah has not entered into a set-apart place made by hand, figures of the true. Okay, so those things that men made on the earth were pictures or figures, copies of those things that were in heaven. But he entered into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of Elohim on our behalf. So this is why it says that his sacrifice was once and for all. Okay, in terms of those things in heaven, that was only needed to be done once. Here on earth, as it said, these things happen again and again because those things keep getting defiled. Hebrews 8:4-5 says, if indeed he were on earth, as he will be in the millennium, he would not be a priest. Again, he's explaining to the Hebrews, why is Yeshua a priest if he's not a Levite? Well, it's because he was called in the same way that Melchizedek was called. If he was on the earth, though, he wouldn't be a priest because the Torah tells us who the priests are. The Torah tells us that it's sons of Aharon only, sons of Aaron that are priests. So if he was on the earth, he would not be a priest since there are priests who offer the gifts according to the Torah. There's already Levites of whom the sons of Aaron are the priests, so Yeshua wouldn't be a priest. You guys, you Hebrews are right. He wouldn't be a priest if he was on earth. But we're not talking about on earth. We're talking about in heaven. Who serve a copy and shadow of the heavenly, as Moshe was warned when he was about to make the tent, for he said, see that you make all according to the pattern shown you on the mountain. So he's saying you knew all this from the beginning. You knew that this tent that's on the earth, the Levites, the sons of Aaron, you knew all of this was patterned after a heavenly tabernacle. And if Yeshua was on the earth, no, he wouldn't be a priest. You guys are right. However, we're talking about the heavenly tabernacle. Matthew 5:17-18 says, do not think that I came to destroy the Torah or the prophets. I did not come to destroy, but to complete, to plurao, or to fulfill, to do fully, preach fully. For truly I say to you, till the heaven and the earth pass away, one jot or one tittle shall by no means pass from the law till all be done. Not the smallest part of the law will pass until the heavens and the earth pass away. And that includes the offering of animals in the sanctuary. That's never going to pass away. Acts 21:17-24, we see, okay, people think, well, we as believers in Christ, we don't offer sacrifices. The apostles didn't offer sacrifices, but is that a sound reckoning? It says, when we had arrived in Jerusalem, the brothers received us gladly. And on the following day, Shaul, that's Paul, obviously the book of Acts, probably written by Luke, okay? He's writing this account. He was traveling with Paul. When we arrived, the following day, Paul went in with us to see Yaakov or James, and all the elders came. And having greeted them, he was relating one by one what Elohim had done among the Gentiles through this service. And when they heard it, they praised the master, and they said to him, you see, brother, how many thousands of Jews there are who have believed, and all are ardent or are zealous for the Torah. And they have been informed about you, okay, just as people are informed about Paul today, that you teach all the Jews who are among the Gentiles to forsake Moshe, saying not to circumcise the children, nor to walk according to the practices. But of course, that's not what Paul was saying. He was saying you're not saved by circumcision. You're not saved by keeping the law. You're saved, justified by faith. That's how your heart is circumcised. He wasn't telling anyone not to do Moshe, though. What then is it? They shall certainly hear that you have come. So loads of people have heard about you, that you're teaching against the Torah, Paul. They're going to hear that you've come. You're going to have to do something to show them that you keep the Torah. What does he do? They tell him, so do this. what we say to you, we have 4 men who have taken a vow. Take them and be cleansed with them. Pay their expenses so that they shave their heads. So this tells us what sort of vow it is. Okay? Be cleansed with them. What vow are you cleansed from that will allow you to shave your head? Okay, it's the Nazirite vow. That's the only vow in all of the scriptures. And all shall know that what they have been informed about you is not so, but that you yourself also walk orderly, keeping the Torah. Okay, so do this, be cleansed from the Nazirite vow, have them all shave their heads, and then everyone's going to know that you keep the Torah. Why? Well, to understand that, we need to know how you are cleansed from the Nazirite vow. It's in Numbers 6. This is the Torah of the Nazirite. When the days of his separation are completed, he shall be brought to the door of the tent of meeting. That's the tabernacle, would have been in Paul's day, the temple, the dwelling place of Yahuwah. Bring them to the door. He shall bring his offering to Yahuwah, 1 male lamb a year old, a perfect one, a burnt offering, 1 ewe lamb a year old, a perfect one as a sin offering, and 1 ram, a perfect one, as a peace offering. So when he's told, pay their expenses, these are the expenses. These are the offerings that they had to bring in order to be cleansed, to shave their heads. And it's through Paul going through this process with these 4 men, which would have been an expensive process to go through to buy all of these things for them. It was by him doing this that they would know that he kept the Torah. And a basket of unleavened bread, cakes of fine flour mixed with oil, and unleavened thin cakes anointed with oil, and their grain offering with their drink offering. So you'd have a grain offering and a drink offering, which would be brought with all of these things. The priest shall bring them before Yahuwah and prepare his sin offering and his burnt offering. And the Nazirite shall shave the head of his separation at the door of the tent of meeting, and shall take the hair from the head of the separation, and shall put it on the fire, which is under the sacrifice of the peace offering. So the only way that you can be cleansed of the Nazirite vow, the only things that he could have been doing is paying for all of these men to make all of these offerings and going to the temple with them to make these offerings. So did Paul offer these offerings? Did Paul make sacrifices? Absolutely. Just before that, in Numbers 6, we read, he shall shave his head on the day of his cleansing. That's exactly what he was told. Go and be cleansed with them so that they can shave their heads. Now, the question will naturally arise, okay then, if we're to be offering sacrifices, if the Jews build the temple in Jerusalem, does that mean we should all be going over to the temple in Jerusalem and offering sacrifices? I would ask you to watch this video. It's 50 minutes long, and I go through why that is not the case. Okay? Just building a temple to Yahuwah doesn't mean that it's the place where he lives. And if he's not living there, you don't need to bring offerings to be cleansed before him to be able to have him dwell in your midst. But I would ask people to watch this video. So we get on to Ezekiel 40, because this now is a prophecy yet future. People come up with all sorts of excuses as to what this prophecy actually is and why we're not going to have a temple in the future. But we will have a temple in the future. And if we had a temple right now where Yahuwah was dwelling in our midst, we would make offerings right now. And I, for one, would be hugely happy about it. The idea that it would be some kind of bad thing or a creepy thing maybe or whatever, that is a million miles away from what the scriptures describe. And I'm sure as we go through Leviticus, we will go through how these things are actually a process of drawing near to Elohim, being near to him, rather than something which the pagans would do to repel their gods. Let's offer sacrifices to the gods and maybe they'll leave us alone. So Ezekiel 40, 1 to 19 says this: in the 25th year of our exile at the beginning of the year, so this is when they were in Babylon, on the 10th day of the month, in the 14th year after the city was smitten, on the same day, the hand of Yahuwah came upon me, and he brought me there. In visions of Elohim, he brought me into the land of Israel and set me on a very high mountain, and upon it toward the south was as the structure of a city. Okay, so he sees a city. Is this New Jerusalem? Maybe. Could be. Might not be. Might be another city. There are other cities that are on the earth. So he brought me there, and look, a man whose appearance was like the appearance of bronze, and a line of flax, and a measuring rod in his hand, and he stood in the gateway. The man said to me, Son of man, see with your eyes, hear with your ears, and set your heart on all that I'm showing you. Okay, so that little snippet of scripture there will explain to you all of everything that you have to do with any of scripture. See with your eyes, hear with your ears, and set your heart on what you are told. For you were brought here in order to show them to you. Declare to the house of Israel all that you are seeing. Okay, and we don't actually see Ezekiel go and tell anybody this information, but this is certainly information for us. Whether he went and told anybody after this, it's not clear from Scripture. He certainly told everybody in the house of Israel after that. Declare to the house of Israel all that you are seeing. And look, a wall all around the outside of the house, and in the man's hand a measuring rod 6 cubits long, each being a cubit and a handbreadth. Now, there were differing cubits of the day, and it says here that it was 6 cubits long, and each cubit was a cubit and a handbreadth. So I don't know whether that's talking about the cubits of Scripture, and each one of those was a normal cubit of man and a handbreadth. I don't really understand what it's saying there, but it's about a cubit, okay? He measured the width of the wall structure 1 rod and the height 1 rod. And he came to the gate facing east. He went up its stairs and measured the threshold of the gate 1 rod wide, and the other threshold 1 rod wide. The little room 1 rod long, 1 rod wide. Between the little rooms is a space of 5 cubits, and the threshold of the gate inwards from the porch of the gate was 1 rod. Okay, so you can see here an artist's impression of this. The east gate here, and then you've got these little rooms with about 5 cubits in between them. I'm not saying that's exactly what they're going to look like. This is just kind of an idea so that you've got something visual in your heads. Then he measured the porch of the inside gate, 1 rod. He measured the porch of the gate, 8 cubits, and its post, 2 cubits. And the porch of the gate was on the inside. And the little rooms of the east gate, 3 on the one side, 3 on the other, all 3 of the same size. Posts were of the same size on this side and that side. He measured the width of the entrance of the gate, 10 cubits, the length of the gate, 13 cubits, the border in front of the little rooms, 1 cubit on this side, 1 cubit on that side. The gate room was 6 cubits on this side, 6 cubits on that side. He measured the gate from the roof of one little room to the roof of the other. The width was 25 cubits door to door. He measured the posts 60 cubits high, even to the posts of the courtyard all around the gate. From the front of the entrance gate to the front of the porch of the inner gate was 50 cubits. And there were narrowed window frames in the little rooms and to their posts to the inside of the gate all around, and for the porches too. And there were windows all around on the inside, and on each post, there were palm trees. Okay, so there were these engravings of palm trees, as we'll see. He brought me into the outer courtyard, and look, rooms in the pavement made all around the courtyard, 30 rooms on the pavement. This is all for the east gate. The pavement was by the side of the gates equal to the length of the gates. The lower pavement, he measured the width, the front of the lower gate to the front of the inner courtyard. Okay, so you get the idea. These are the measurements of the gates. And there's 4 gates that lead into this temple. And they're used for different things. People come in from the east, from the north, leaving to the south, and all sorts of other information that were given. Ezekiel 40, a bit further on, says there was a room with its entrance by the posts of the gate where they washed the burnt offering. Okay, so here we see these animals being prepared to be offered. This is where they washed the burnt offering, remembering, of course, that this is a prophecy of the future. And as it turns out, this is a prophecy after Messiah has returned. This is certainly not something we've ever seen or anyone on the earth has ever seen. So this is yet future. And in the porch of the gate were 2 tables on this side, 2 tables on that side, on which to sacrifice the burnt offering and the sin offering and the guilt offering. Again, people, because they've got that false assumption in their head that we're not going to have flesh, we don't need our flesh cleansed. This isn't going to be for us. This is going to be for other people. Maybe it's for the nations or whoever else. All of those things are possibilities. One thing is sure, though, there will be animal sacrifices in the time after Yeshua comes back. And on the outer side, as one went up to the entrance of the north gate, were 2 tables. And on the other side of the porch of the gate were 2 tables. 4 tables were on this side, 4 tables on that side. By the side of the gate, 8 tables on which they sacrificed. So there's a lot of sacrifices going on. There were 4 tables of hewn stone for the burnt offering, 1 cubit and a half long, 1 cubit and a half wide, 1 cubit high. On these they placed the instruments with which they sacrificed the burnt offering and the offering. And the double hooks, a handbreadth wide, they were fastened all around, and on the tables was the flesh of the offerings. We're also told this variously throughout these 8 chapters that we're going to see. He said to me, this is the place where the priests, 9 chapters, where the priests cook the guilt offering and the sin offering, where they bake the grain offering, so as not to bring them out into the outer courtyard to set the people apart. Okay, so we see this is all laid out. This is where the priests are going to be. It's where they're going to operate. It's going to be in the holy portion of land, which is given to Yahuwah. And we see all of these things. The tables where they're going to do this. This is where they're going to wash the offerings. This is the place where they're going to cook them, because a large part of this was cooking and eating these things. Ezekiel 46:24 we see, and he said to me, these are the kitchens where the attendants of the house cook the sacrifices of the people. So this is a big operation that's going on. He said to me, this room facing south is for the priests who guard the duty of the house. The room facing north is for the priests who guard the duty of the altar. It tells us something important here. It says, they are the sons of Zadok, from the sons of Levi, who come near to Yahuwah to serve him. So this is the time of Reformation. This is the time when everything is going to be returned to as it should be. We see animals being offered to Yahuwah there, but we also, and we'll see this as we get onto the third part, we see very specific things that are different to the Torah that we're given now. These regulations that are in place now are different in this temple because it's the time of Reformation. And instead of it being any of the sons of Aharon, anyone who's descended from Aaron who can serve as a priest, instead it's the sons of Zadok. And Zadok was a son of Aaron. So he was somebody who, according to the Torah, could be high priest. So all of his sons are sons of Aaron. So the Torah is no different in that regard. We still have the sons of Aaron being the priests. Okay, but it's specifically a lineage within Aaron. Just as within the Levites, you had those who could carry the holy objects. Within them, you had the sons of Aaron. You're going ever smaller in group. in this temple, it's going to be an even smaller group from the sons of Aaron, which are going to be the sons of Zadok. They're the ones who come near Yahuwah for a reason that we'll see. On the four sides, he measured it. It had the wall all around, 500 cubits long, 500 wide, to separate the set-apart places from the common. And I think it's from scriptures like this that we ended up with the soreg, with the wall of separation, which separated the Gentiles, the common, from the holy place. Ezekiel 41:15-25 says, not that that's what these scriptures are teaching, just I think that's where it came from. And he measured the length of the building to the front of the separate place behind it, its galleries on the one side and on the other side 100 cubits, as well as the inner temple and the porches of the courtyard. This is where we're getting to those things patterned after those things in heaven, okay, the holy place, like the tabernacle would have been. The doorposts and the narrowed window frames, the galleries all around, there are 3 levels opposite the thresholds. You've got galleries with 3 levels with little narrow windows, were paneled with wood. Okay, this is interesting. From the ground to the windows, and the windows were covered. From the space above the door, even to the inner house, as well as the outside, and on every wall all around, inside and outside, by measure. Okay, so you've got all of this wooden paneling going on. And it was made with cherubim and palm trees, and a palm tree between cherub and cherub, cherub and cherub. A cherub had 2 faces. So this is how all of the wood is going to be carved. It's going to have palm trees, and it's going to have cherubim. So that the face of the man was towards a palm tree on one side, and the face of a young lion toward the palm tree on the other side. So you've got palm tree, then a cherub, then a palm tree. And the cherubs have 2 faces. You've got the face of a man and the face of a young lion facing each palm tree. Made on all the house all around. Okay, so it's going to look something like that. Okay, palm trees with a cherub in the middle, and the cherub's got those 2 faces. It's going to look something like that. It's going to be wooden panels, whatever that's going to look like. This just so you get some kind of idea. From the floor to the space above the door, and on the wall of the temple, cherubim and palm trees were carved. The doorposts of the temple were square. The front of the set-apart place, the appearance of one was like the appearance of the other. The altar was of wood, 3 cubits high. That's interesting in and of itself. The altar is not made of stone here. The altar is made of wood. So the altar is made of wood, 3 cubits high. Its length 2 cubits. Its corners, its length, and its sides were of wood. And he said to me, this is the table that is before Yahuwah. And the temple in the set-apart place had 2 doors. Each of the doors had 2 panels, folding panels, 2 panels for one door, 2 panels for the other door. Cherubim and palm trees were carved on the doors of the temple, like those carved on the walls. Thick wood, again, was on the front of the porch outside. Ezekiel 42, he said to me, the north rooms, the south rooms, which are opposite the separate place, the set-apart rooms where the priests who approach Yahuwah eat the most set-apart offerings, there they place the most set-apart items, or the holy of holy items. The grain offering, the sin offering, the guilt offering, for the place is set apart. So all these things had to be set apart. They've got their own place where they are set apart from anything that is common. When the priests enter, they are not to go out of the set-apart room into the outer courtyard, but they leave their garments in which they attend there, for they are set apart, and they shall put on other garments and shall draw near to that which is for the people. Okay, so they've got their holy garments, which we'll see as we go into what they were instructed to make on the earth, that they weren't to wear these garments when they went out, that they were to take them off because they had been made holy. So Ezekiel 43 begins and says, and he led me to the gate facing east. That was the gate that we heard about before. And it says, and see the esteem or the glory, the kavod of the Elohim of Yisrael came from the way of the east, and his voice was like the sound of many waters, and the earth shone from his esteem. And I love the way the artist has rendered the glory of Yahuwah. I don't know how you would represent that visually, but that's what we've got. It's of gyroscopes and pixelated art. I think I've used a cloud before when I've been trying to represent it. We see the glory of Yahuwah. And this word kavod is the word. It's got a sense of being weighty. And we do see that when Moshe enters into the tabernacle, he can't stand up because the glory of Yahuwah is there. We see that elsewhere in the scriptures as well. It says, it was like the appearance of the vision which I saw, like the vision which I saw when he came to destroy the city, and the visions were like the vision which I saw by the river Kavar, and I fell on my face. The esteem of Yahuwah came into our house by way of the gate facing east, and the Spirit took me up and brought me into the inner courtyard, and see, the esteem of Yahuwah filled the house. So like it does with Moses, like it does with Solomon's temple, the esteem of Yahuwah fills the temple here. I presume, and it is an assumption here, that when it says, they were like the vision which I saw by the river Kavar, I meant to check this out, but I presume that is when he sees the esteem of Yahuwah leaving the temple in Ezekiel 8, 9, and 10. So if you're interested, you might want to check that out, but that's what I presume it is. I heard someone speaking to me from the house while a man stood beside me. And he said to me, Son of man, this is the place of my throne and the place of the soles of my feet when I dwell in the midst of the children of Israel forever. Okay, so this temple is when he's dwelling in the midst of the children of Israel forever. So this is after Yeshua's come back. And the house of Israel shall no longer defile my set-apart name. They, nor their kings, by their whoring, by the corpses of their kings on their high places. Okay, so the kings not being good kings, they will no longer defile it in this way. When they place their threshold by my threshold, so when their houses are by my house, and their doorposts by my doorpost, with the wall between them and me, they defiled my set-apart name by the abominations which they have done, so I consume them in my displeasure. And of course, this has already happened at this point to the house of Israel, as in one half of the whole house of Israel. To the house of Judah, at this point, they were in exile in Babylon. They were going to be brought back to the land, and the house of Judah, of course, would be scattered in 70 AD also. Now let them put their whoring and the corpses of their kings far away from me, and I shall dwell in their midst forever. Okay, so again, we know when this is. It's when he's dwelling in our midst. This is a prophecy which is given for us, a promise for us of the future to come, that he will come and dwell in our midst, in a temple in the future. Again, when we think of sacrifices and offerings being made in a temple, the way that we think about it in common culture and paganism and things like that, it's completely different to how the scriptures are describing it. It's completely different. If you imagine you've just got a temple, it's different to imagining just having a temple like what they will have if they build a temple in Jerusalem, and having a place where Yahuwah, the King of the universe, comes to dwell forever. That's quite an amazing thing, to live in a place where God lives next door or in the street over from you. That's quite an amazing thing that we're promised here. Son of man, explain the house to the house of Israel, and when they are ashamed of their crookednesses, they shall measure the measurements. When they're ashamed of their crookednesses, this is what we hear. When you shema and you turn back to me with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might, then I will gather you back to the land. And this is what will be fulfilled at that point. Since they shall be ashamed of all that they did, Make known to them the design of the house and its structure and its exits and its entrances, its entire design, all its laws, all of its chukim, or chukat, all its forms, all its Torot, plural of Torah. Write it down before their eyes so that they observe its entire design and all its laws and shall do them. This is the Torah of the house upon the mountaintop. All the boundary of it, all around, is most set apart. It is holy of holies. See, this is the Torah of the house. Later in Ezekiel 43, it tells us this. He said to me, Son of man, thus says the Master Yahuwah, these are the laws of the altar on the day when it is made, for offering burnt offerings on it and for sprinkling blood on it. And you shall give a young bull for a sin offering to the priests, the Levites, who are of the seed of Zadok, who approach unto me, declares the Master Yahuwah. And you shall take some of its blood, put it on the four horns of the altar, on the four corners of the ledge, and on the rim around it, and shall cleanse it and make atonement for it. So here, instead of it being a bronze altar, which is what they had in the tabernacle, this is the wooden altar. But we see them doing very similar things to cleanse it. You shall take the bull of the sin offering and burn it in the appointed place of the house outside the set apart place. And on the second day you bring a male goat, a perfect one for a sin offering, and they shall cleanse the altar as they cleansed it with the bull. So everything they were commanded for the bull, they do with these as well. When you have ended cleansing it, bring a young bull, a perfect one, and a ram from the flock, a perfect one, a tamim one in which there is no blemish. And you shall bring them before Yahuwah, and the priest shall throw salt on them and offer them up as a burnt offering to Yahuwah. Prepare a goat for a sin offering for 7 days. Prepare a young bull and a ram from the flock, perfect ones. So this is the procedure that we see throughout Scripture. Okay, we're going to see it in Exodus 40. We're going to see it be commanded in Exodus 40, these 8 days. Then when we get to Torah portion Shmini, which means 8th, we're going to learn about these 8 days. So this will be in the next few Torah portions. For 7 days they shall make atonement for the altar and cleanse it and ordain it. When these days are completed, it shall be on the 8th day, as it was in the wilderness, and thereafter that the priests make your burnt offerings and your peace offerings on the altar, and I shall accept you, declares the Master Yahuwah. Okay, so we've got Yeshua's offering in heaven. That's what perfects us. That's what cleanses the conscience. But these things on earth are also to take place. Not now. We don't have a temple. But in the future, there will be a temple built. Ezekiel 44, 1-15 says, And he brought me back to the outer gate of the set-apart place, which faces east, and it was shut. And Yahuwah said to me, This gate is shut, it is not opened, no one enters it, because Yahuwah Elohim of Yisrael has entered by it, and it shall be shut. Just like he leaves out of a certain gate, here we see that he returns by this gate, that his presence returns, and nobody can enter in by it. It's going to be shut. The prince, this is the word nasi. We see this word in the Torah when the rulers of thousands of Israel are all described as nasi. Just think of it as the guy who's in charge, basically. The nasi, as nasi, he sits in it to eat bread before Yahuwah, coming in by way of the porch of the gate and going out by the same way. So this outer gate, okay, the gate is shut, but the prince sits in it and he enters in by a different way and he goes out by the same way. He enters and leaves by the porch. And he brought me by way of the north gate to the front of the house, and I looked and saw the esteem of Yahuwah filled the house of Yahuwah, and I fell on my face. And Yahuwah said to me, Son of man, set your heart, see with your eyes and hear with your ears all that I say to you concerning all the laws of the house of Yahuwah and all its Torot. And you shall set your heart to the entrance of the house with all the exits of the set-apart place. And shall say to the rebellious, to the house of Yisrael, thus said the Master Yahuwah, O house of Yisrael, enough of all these abominations of yours, that you brought in, sons of a foreigner, uncircumcised in heart and uncircumcised in flesh, to be in my set-apart place, to profane it, my house, that you brought near my food, the fat and the blood. You broke my covenant because of all your abominations. So what they were doing is they were bringing Gentiles into the house to do all of these things, which again is probably where that man-made law of the soreg comes from. Well, that's what the scripture commands, but it's probably from the ideas in Ezekiel 40 through 48. You did not guard the charge of that which is set apart to me, but you have set others to guard the charge of my set apart place for you. Thus said the Master Yahuwah, no son of a foreigner uncircumcised in heart or uncircumcised in flesh comes into my set apart place, even any son of a foreigner who is among the children of Israel. So the Gentiles will come and they will bring things for Yahuwah, but they will not enter into his temple. The Levites who went far from me when Israel went astray, who strayed away from me after their idols, they shall bear their iniquity. So there was one group of these Levites who did good, the sons of Zadok, and there were one group who did not do good, the large majority of them, again, the few and the many. And they were attendants in my set-apart place, as gatekeepers of the house, and attendants of the house, sacrificing the burnt offering and the offering for the people, and standing before them to attend to them. Because they attended to them before their idols and became a stumbling block of crookedness or iniquity to the house of Israel. Therefore I have lifted my hand in an oath against them, declares Yahuwah, that they shall bear their crookedness or bear their iniquity, and not come near to me to serve as my priest, nor come near any of that which is set apart to me. So all of that stuff which is holy to him is to be set apart, that was to be kept in those rooms that we saw at the end of the first part. Okay, they're not to come near that because they went astray. Nor into the most set apart place, and they shall bear their shame and their abominations which they have done. So that's the bad Levites. Yet I shall make them, those who guard the duty of the house, that is to do everything that is commanded about the house, for all its work and for all that has to be done in it. But the priests, the Levites, the sons of Zadok, who guarded the duty of my set-apart place, when the children of Israel went astray from me, so the remnant, the few, those people, they shall draw near to me to serve me, and shall stand before me to bring to me the fat and the blood, declares the Master Yahuwah. So this is what the sons of Zadok, those who remain faithful to Yahuwah, it is Zadok's lineage which is chosen. Ezekiel 44:23-30 says, and they are to teach my people the difference between the set apart and the profane, what is not done today in large part, and make them know what is unclean and what is clean. And they are to stand as judges in a dispute and judge it according to my mishpatim, my justices. And they are to guard my Torah and my laws in all my appointed festivals and set apart my Sabbath. So this is what the Levites should be doing. And they are not to defile themselves by coming near a dead man, only for a father or mother, for a son or daughter, for a brother or unmarried sister, they defile themselves. So this is one of the exceptions which is laid out for us in Scripture. Okay, you have to do this in all circumstances. Somebody that you're close to dies, apart from these people. So the priests had to be clean, they had to be holy before Yahuwah, and they had to remain in that way. If somebody dies, you become unclean by becoming close to a dead body. So the priests can't just abandon their duties and say, oh, I really like that person, I'm going to become unclean for them, and then I'm not going to be able to go and do my duty in the house of Yahuwah. But exceptions are made for very close relationships. After his cleansing, they count 7 days for him. And on the day that he comes into the inner court of the set-apart place, to attend in the set-apart place, he brings his sin offering, which is to make atonement for and to cleanse him, declares the Master Yahuwah. And it shall be to them for an inheritance. I am their inheritance, and you give them no possession in Israel. Israel, I am their possession. So again, in the future, as it was previously, they have no possession. Yahuwah is their possession. The grain offering, the sin offering, the guilt offering, they are to eat, and all that is dedicated in Israel is theirs. Okay, so this is their possession. It is not given to them as this is your land and this is your stuff. It is given to them by what Yahuwah gives to them. The first of all the first fruits of all, and every terumah of all your terumah belongs to the priests, and the first of your ground meal you give to the priest, so that a blessing rests on your house. Ezekiel 45 tells us about how the rest of the land is divided up. The other tribes are given a possession in Israel. It says, when you divide the land by lot into inheritance, what that means is they were going to divide the land by lot. They were going to cast lots for which part of the land belongs to which person. Yahuwah, we're told in Scripture, is the one who makes the decision that the lots come out on. So the land is divided by lot, just as it is at the end of the Torah and in the book of Joshua, to offer a contribution to Yahuwah, a set-apart portion of the land in length 25,000 cubits long, and in width 10,000 cubits. This being set apart throughout its border all around. Of this, a square plot is to be for the set-apart place, 500 by 500 with 50 cubits around it for an open space. So this is the holy portion of the land, or the land that is set apart. So when you divide the land, you're going to set this part of it apart. And this is going to be where the temple is. And from this measure, you are to measure 25,000 cubits long and 10,000 wide. And it is to be, and in it, rather, is to be the set-apart place, the most set-apart place. This is where the temple is to be. This is to be a set-apart portion of the land belonging to the priests, the attendants of the set-apart place, who draw near to serve Yahuwah, and it shall be a place for their houses, and set-apart ground for the set-apart place. So this is where the land for the Levites to live will be. 25,000 cubits in length, 10,000 in width is for the Levites, the attendants of the house, for them for a possession, 20 rooms. Okay, so whereas all of the other tribes were to have the inheritance given to them in the holy portion, this is where the Levites would live. Give the city as possession, 5,000 cubits wide, 25,000 long, and the contribution of the set apart portion, it belongs to all the house of Israel. Okay, give the city as possession. So this isn't saying this will be the city. It's saying there will be a city, and to the city you give this as possession. The Nasi, the prince, is to have a portion on one side and the other of the set-apart contribution and the possession of the city. And bordering on the set-apart contribution and the possession of the city on the west side westward, and on the east side eastward, and the length alongside one of the portions from the west border to the east border. Okay, so this is a set-apart portion of land given from all the other land, which is where you'll find the houses of the Levites, and also this area, which is called the possession of the city. Of the land, this is his possession in Israel, the prince's possession, the Nasi. And my Nasi, plural, shall no longer oppress my people, because this is historically how they were. And they shall give the land to the house of Israel according to their tribes. Thus said the Master Yahuwah, enough, you Nasi of Yisrael, put away violence and plundering and do mishpat, justice and righteousness. Stop your dispossessions of my people, declares the Master Yahuwah. Have right scales and a right ephah and a right bath. Okay, so the way that you reckon things, the way that you weigh things out, the way that you measure fluid, all of it is going to be in accordance with righteousness and justice. Later in Ezekiel 45, thus said the Master Yahuwah, in the first month, on the first of the month, you are to take a young bull, a perfect one, and shall cleanse the set-apart place. That's not in the Torah. Okay, this is a part of the time of Reformation. This is a restoring back to the way things should be. Okay, not the way things are now, the way that things should be in the time of restoration or the time of Reformation. So we don't have this offering taking place in the first month on the Chodesh, on the first day. The priest shall take some of the blood of the sin offering and put it on the doorposts of the house and on the four corners of the ledge of the altar and on the posts of the gate of the inner courtyard. Kind of sounds a bit like what they did that first Passover. Not exactly the same. This is for the doors, the doorposts of the house and on the ledge of the altar. So it's kind of a bit like Yom Kippur. It's a bit like Passover, but it is neither of them, and it's not commanded in this present time. It's commanded in the time of Reformation. And do the same on the seventh of the month, rather. So the seventh of the first month, you do the same for anyone who makes a mistake or is foolish. Okay, so mistaken sin. And you shall make atonement for the house. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month, okay, it should be familiar to us, that's when Passover is. You have the Passover, a festival of 7 days, unleavened bread is eaten. Okay, so 14th day of the month, you have Passover. You also have, as we do now, a festival of 7 days, unleavened bread. On the day that the prince shall prepare for himself, on that day rather, the prince shall prepare for himself and for all the people of the land a bull for a sin offering. Okay, obviously that's different. It's not a lamb for a sin offering anymore. He prepares for himself and for the people of the land a lamb. You'll notice here that we don't have a high priest offering this. We have this guy who is called the Nasi, the prince. Each tribe had the Nasi. I can only assume that this is the Nasi of the tribe of Levi, the tribe of Levi. And during the 7 days of the festival, he prepares as a burnt offering to Yahuwah 7 bulls and 7 rams, perfect ones, daily for 7 days, and a male goat daily for a sin offering. And he prepares a grain offering of 1 ephah for each bull, 1 ephah for each ram, together with a hin of oil for each ephah of grain. In the 7th month, on the 15th day of the month, at the festival, okay, that's when we have Sukkot, he prepares like these 7 days as the sin offering, as the burnt offering, as the grain offering, and as the oil. So just as the 7 days of unleavened bread have these offerings, it's exactly the same offerings for Sukkot. Again, all of this is the time of Reformation. It's not what we do now. Ezekiel 46 says, thus said the Master Yahuwah, the gate of the inner courtyard facing east is shut for the 6 days of work, but on the Sabbath it's opened, and on the day of the Chodesh it is opened. So that first day of the Chodesh, it's open on that, and each Sabbath it's open. But usually it will be closed. The prince, the Nasi, shall enter by way of the porch of that gate from the outside. He shall stand by the post, and the priest shall prepare his burnt offering and his peace offerings, and he shall bow himself at the threshold of the gate, and he shall go out, but the gate is not shut until evening. So this way that he enters in, that's not shut until evening. And the people of the land shall also bow themselves at the entrance to this gate before Yahuwah on the Sabbaths and on the Chodeshim. And the burnt offering which the Nasi brings to Yahuwah on the Sabbath day is 6 lambs, perfect ones, and a ram, a perfect one. Okay, so again, this is different to if we had the temple now. And the grain offering is 1 ephah for a ram, and the grain offering for the lambs, a gift of his hand, and a hin of oil for an ephah. And on the day of the Chodesh, a young bull, a perfect one, 6 lambs and a ram. They should be tamim, they should be perfect, blemishless. And he prepares a grain offering of an ephah for a bull, and an ephah for a ram, and for the lambs as his hand attains, and a hin of oil for an ephah. Which is interesting, because the other animals, they all have to have a specific amount. For the lamb, it's as his hand attains, whatever that means, as he deems to bring, I presume. And when the prince enters, he comes by way of the porch of that gate and goes out the same way. When the people of the land enter before Yahuwah at the appointed times, that's all your feasts, whoever shall enter by way of the north gate to bow himself goes out by way of the south gate. Obviously got meaning to Yahuwah. Whoever enters by way of the south gate goes out by way of the north gate. He shall not return by way of the gate through which he came, but goes out through the opposite way, the opposite one. Don't know, sounds a bit like COVID restrictions. No idea what the purpose of this is, but this is the way that it will be. The prince is to be in their midst, entering when they enter and going out when they go out. And in the festivals and in the appointed times, the grain offering is an ephah for a bull and an ephah for a ram, and for lambs, the gift of his hand. So again, as his hand attains, it must just be as he deems to bring. Just like the people all brought as their hearts moved them. Seems to be a very similar thing here. For the lambs, the gift of his hand, and a hin of oil for an ephah. So every ephah that's brought, an ephah for a ram, an ephah for a bull, you bring a hin of oil along with that also. And when the Nasi makes a spontaneous burnt offering or spontaneous peace offerings to Yahuwah, the gate facing east shall be opened for him, and he shall prepare his burnt offering and his peace offerings as he did on the Sabbath day, and he shall go out, and after he goes out, the gate shall be shut. Okay, so the gate's opened specifically for him. It's usually shut. He comes in when he wants to make a burnt offering or a peace offering. Then once he's gone out, the gate is shut and remains shut. And make a daily burnt offering to Yahuwah of a lamb a year old, a perfect one, preparing it morning by morning. Okay, and that is the same, although we also now, before the time of Reformation, have one in the evening as well. Prepare a grain offering with it morning by morning, 1/6 of an ephah, and 1/3 of a hin of oil to moisten the fine flour, a grain offering to Yahuwah, continual everlasting laws. Prepare the lamb, the grain offering, and the oil morning by morning, a continual burnt offering. Thus said the Master Yahuwah, when the Nasi gives a gift or some of his inheritance to any of his sons, it belongs to his sons. It's their possession by inheritance. So he is able to give some of what is his perpetually to his sons. When he gives a gift of some of his inheritance to one of his servants, then it shall be his till the year of release. This is the Jubilee. So we're going to have a Jubilee year as well, when all debt is forgiven, and it shall return to the prince. Only the inheritance of his sons is there. So in the Jubilee year, your inheritance, what is yours, returns to you. So your land will return to you. And in this way, no one would be able to accrue all of the land. Today, you've got people who have got control over vast swathes of land. That would never be the system in Israel. If somebody is accrued a lot of land, in the 50th year, in the year of Jubilee, it returns to the person whose inheritance it is. However, the prince can give a gift of something that's his to one of his sons. One of his children is what the word actually means. It could be sons, it could be children also. And the Nasi does not take any of the people's inheritance by dispossessing them from their possession. He is to give his sons their inheritance from his own inheritance. And prepare a grain offering with it, morning by morning, a sixth of an ephah, and a third of a hin. Did we just read this? Oh, I just copied this. Yeah, okay, so this is what it says. He is to give his sons their inheritance from his own possession, so that none of my people are separated from his possession. The longest you can be separated from your possession is 49 years, and then the next Jubilee it will be returned to you. Ezekiel 47 says this, and he turned me back to the door of the house, and look, water was flowing from under the threshold of the house toward the east. So we've got water flowing from this temple toward the east. For the house faced east, and the water was flowing from under the right side of the house from the south of the altar. Okay, interesting. And he led me out by way of the north gate, took me round on the outside of the outer gate facing east, and look, water trickling out on the right side. As the man went out to the east with the line in his hand, so his measuring rod, he measured 1,000 cubits, and then he made me pass over into water. And at this point, the water comes up to his ankles. And he measured 1,000 more cubits, and he made me pass over into the water to the knees now. And he measured 1,000 and made me pass over water to the loins. Okay, so he keeps getting deeper and deeper into this water. And he measured 1,000, the stream that I was unable to pass over. So we can't walk through this stream. For the water had risen, water to swim. So now it's gone. It's not just water to his loins, it's water that he would have to swim in. He can't pass over. A stream that is not passed over. And he said to me, Son of man, have you seen this? And he led me and brought me back to the bank of the stream. So the stream's coming out the temple and keeps getting deeper and deeper, takes him to the bank. When I returned then, I looked along the bank of the stream where very many trees on one side and on the other side. And he said to me, these waters are flowing towards the eastern country and go down into the Arava and enter the sea, being made to flow into the sea, and the waters shall be healed. So you've got water that's coming out of the temple, and what it's doing is it's healing the other waters. It's going to go into the sea, and it's going to heal the sea. And what that appears to me to mean is that the sea is no longer going to be salty. Okay, it's going to be healed. It's going to be water of life. It shall be that every swarming creature, wherever the stream goes, shall live. There shall be very many fish, for these waters shall go there, and they are healed. And wherever the stream flows, all shall live. And it shall be that fishermen stand along it, from Ein Gedi to Ein Egalim, being places for spreading their nets. So this idea of veganism in the millennium is not founded in Scripture. There's going to be fishermen catching fish in their nets. Their fish is to be of the same kind as the fish of the great sea. Very many. Okay, so the fish that are in the stream are going to be the same as the ones in the sea. That's not what we find now, because the sea's salt water, so the fish are different. Its swamps and marshes shall not be healed. Okay, interesting. They shall be given over to salt. So the swamps and marshes are salty. And by the bank of the stream, on both sides, grow all kinds of trees used for food, whose leaves do not wither and fruit do not fail. They bear fruit every month, because their water flows from the set-apart place, and their fruit shall be for food, their leaves for healing. So the trees that are grown near this water of life, they're going to grow these leaves, which are for healing, and fruit for food, and it's going to be this abundance of life. Ezekiel 47:21-23 says, you shall divide this land among yourselves according to the tribes of Israel. And it shall be that you divide it by lot as an inheritance for yourselves and for the strangers who sojourn in your midst and who bear children among you. And they shall be to you as native born among the children of Israel. With you they have an inheritance in the midst of the tribes of Israel. And it shall be that in whatever tribe the stranger sojourns, that you give him his inheritance, declares the Master Yahuwah. So this is perhaps talking about us, okay, the strangers who are among the children of Israel. Whatever tribe they sojourn in, that's the tribe that they will become. Okay, it could just be talking about some other people. It's not necessarily us. It's not clear who it is. I'll tell you exactly who it is, though. The stranger who sojourns in the midst of the children of Israel at that time kind of makes me think that it's probably not us. But that principle, I would say, applies to us. Okay, the tribe that we will become part of is the tribe that we sojourn, so to speak, with. And of these is the set-apart contribution for the priests. On the north, 25,000 cubits. On the west, 10,000 in width. This is the area we heard of before. When you divide this place by lot for inheritance, you're to set apart an area of the land. And on the east, 10,000 in width. On the south, 25,000 in length. And the set-apart place of Yahuwah shall be in its midst. So this is where the temple is during this time. For the priests of the sons of Zadok, who are set apart, who did guard my charge, who did not go astray when the children of Israel went astray, as the Levites went astray, so this contribution shall be to them from the contribution of the land, a most set apart place by the border of the Levites. And alongside the border of the priests, the Levites have 25,000 cubits in length, 10,000 in width. Its entire length is 25,000, and its width 10,000. And they do not sell any of it, nor exchange it, nor transfer this best part of the land, for it's set apart to Yahuwah. So they're able to dwell there. They're able to do whatever they can do there. What they can't do is sell it, because it's not their possession. It belongs to Yahuwah. It's set apart to him. And the 5,000 cubits in width that is left, facing the 25,000, is for common use by the city. I presume this is the city of New Jerusalem, but it's like the possession for the city. This land is the city's land. For dwellings and open land, and the city shall be in its midst. And these are its measurements: the north side 4,500 cubits, the south side 4,500, the east side 4,500, the west side 4,500 cubits. Now we're given measurements for New Jerusalem, but that's given in stadion. And when we're going back and forth between units, it's not clear exactly how long that is. We will know at this point whether or not this is the New Jerusalem that it's talking about, or whether it's another city that it's talking about. The great city is a term which is used for 3 different cities in Scripture. Okay, it's used in Babylon and Jerusalem and somewhere else. I can't remember now, but it's a term that's used for 3 places. So the city isn't necessarily New Jerusalem, although it could be. The open land of the city shall be to the north 250 cubits, to the south 250, to the east 250, and to the west 250. The rest of the length alongside the contribution of the set-apart portion, so this is the Terumah of the land they bring to Yahuwah, is 10,000 cubits to the east, 10,000 to the west, and it shall be alongside the contribution of the set-apart portion, and its increase shall be food for the workers of the city. Okay, so those who work in the city, this is where their food is going to be grown. The workers of the city from all the tribes of Israel shall till it. The ground shall be tilled during this time. The entire contribution is 25,000 cubits by 25,000 cubits, 4 square. You are to offer up the set-apart contribution with the possession of the city. The rest is for the Nasi on one side, and on the other of the set-apart contribution, the possession of the city facing the 25,000 cubits of the set-apart contribution as far as the eastern border, and westward facing the 25,000 as far as the western border alongside the portions of the Nasi and the set-apart Terumah, and the set-apart place of the house shall be in its midst. Okay, so this is where our temple is. And this is, generally this is how the land is going to be. There's going to be within the temple the bit where it's set apart for the people to eat the offerings, and then you're going to have a set apart bit which is for the growing of other food, and there's going to be all of these trees for food, and the leaves are going to be for the healing of the nations, and it's going to be great. So the possession of the Levites and the possession of the city are in the midst of what belongs to the Nasi. Between the border of Yehudah and the border of Benjamin, it belongs to the prince. Ezekiel 48:30-35 also tells us this. It says, these are the exits of the city, the gates of the city, according to the names of the children of Israel. That's the same in New Jerusalem. Could be that it's the same in this city. Could be that this is the New Jerusalem. On the north side, measuring 4,500 cubits. Now, this is the exits of the city that it's talking about, that are 4,500 cubits. The three gates northward, one for Reuben, Judah, Levi. On the east side, same distance, three gates, one for Joseph, one for Benjamin, one for Dan. On the south side, one for Simeon, one for Issachar, one for Zebulun. On the west side, one for Gad, one for Asher, and one for Naphtali. And all of these exits are 4,500 cubits. All around, 18,000 cubits. Doesn't mean that's the length of the entire city, just means that's the length of the exits of the city. And the name of the city, which we read about before, the name that will be put upon us if we overcome, that name is Yahuwah is there. And the vowel pointings for Yahuwah in the Hebrew here are present. Whereas when we read the Lord, we don't have the vowel pointings most of the time, but the vowel pointings are present here. Revelation 21:9-27. One of the seven angels who held the seven bowls filled with the seven last plagues, okay, so this is the bowl judgments, came to me, spoke with me, saying, come, I will show you the bride, the Lamb's wife. Okay, we know that we are the body of Messiah. We are the Lamb's wife. We are the temple in the Spirit, so to speak. And the place where we will dwell is New Jerusalem. Okay, so New Jerusalem is the Lamb's wife because that's where we're going to be. He carried me away in the Spirit to a great and high mountain and showed me the great city, the set apart Jerusalem, descending out of the heaven from Elohim. So this will happen. New Jerusalem will come down out of the heavens, having the esteem of Elohim, and her light was like a most precious stone, like a jasper stone, clear as crystal. And having a great and high wall, having 12 gates, very much like the city we read of in Ezekiel 48, and at the gates 12 angels, and names written on them, which are those of the 12 tribes of the children of Israel. 3 gates on the east, 3 on the north, 3 on the south, 3 on the west, just like in Ezekiel 48. The wall of the city had 12 foundations. It's quite a lot of foundations. And on them were the names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. And he who spoke with me had a golden measuring rod, just like that which appears to Ezekiel, to measure the city and its gates and its wall. So, it's very reminiscent language to Ezekiel. The city lies four-cornered. Its length is as great as its breadth. And he measured the city with the rod, 12,000 stadion. It's the Greek word. The length and the breadth and the height of it are equal. And he measured its wall 144, interesting number, cubits, according to the measure of a man, that is of an angel. So it's a really high wall. And this, people have this idea that when we die, we go to heaven. That's not what the scriptures describe, the scriptures describe, that we will be resurrected, that we will receive a heavenly body, and that we will ultimately dwell on the earth, and New Jerusalem will come down out of the heavens for us to dwell in, and this city will have these 12 gates, and we will live there. The structure of its wall was jasper, and the city was clean gold like clear glass. And the foundations of the wall of the city were adorned with all kinds of precious stones: jasper, sapphire, agate, emerald, sardonyx, ruby, chrysolite, beryl, topaz, chrysoprase, jacinth, and amethyst. I don't know whether they're the actual stones that it's going to be, but they're the translations that we have. The 12 gates were 12 pearls. Okay? You'll notice in this picture, this gate has a pearl on it. That's not what it says. It says that the gates were pearls. Now, I don't know, but I'm going to make an assumption that this is where the term going through the pearly gates comes from, of when you go to heaven. But again, that's a misunderstanding of what actually happens when you die. Where we live is the kingdom, but the kingdom isn't in heaven. It descends from heaven, and we will pass through the pearly gates in the future, Yah willing. Each one of its gates was a single pearl, and the street of the city was clean gold like transparent glass. And I saw no dwelling place in it, for Yahuwah El Shaddai is its dwelling place and the Lamb. So there is no temple in the city, okay, for those who dwell in the city. There is a temple, however, that is outside of the city, and it's clearly described as being outside of the city in Ezekiel 40 through 48, so that poses no problem for us. But within it, the dwelling place will be El Shaddai and the Lamb. The city had no need of the sun, nor of the moon to shine in it, for the esteem of Elohim lightened it, and the Lamb is its lamp. So for those who are dwelling in the city, it's going to be quite weird. There's going to be no need of the sun or of the moon. There's just going to be Yeshua. There's going to be the light, whatever that ends up looking like. I'm not going to try and imagine it, because we're told that we can't. And the Gentiles of those who are saved shall walk in its light, and the kings of the earth shall bring their esteem into it. So this is where the Gentiles are going to be outside of the city. The land of Israel itself is, in fact, as the land of Israel was outside of Jerusalem, is in fact outside of the city. Its gates shall not be shut at all by day, for night shall not be there. So if you said, we're going to shut the gates by day, that would mean that they were always shut. And they shall bring the esteem and the appreciation of the Gentiles into it. So the Gentiles will come, and this will be brought into the city. And there shall by no means enter into it whatever is unclean, neither anyone doing abomination and falsehood, but only those who are written in the Lamb's book of life. They're the only people who are able to enter into the city. It doesn't actually say, come to think of it, that they live in the city. It just says that they have the right to enter into the city. Revelation 22 says, and he said to me, do not seal the words of the prophecy of this book, because the time is near. He who does wrong, let him do more wrong. He who is filthy, let him be more filthy. He who is righteous, let him be more righteous. Kind of puts me in mind of he who does not possess even what he possesses shall be taken from him. He who is set apart, let him be more set apart. And see, I am coming speedily, and my reward is with me to give to each according to his work. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. All of these three are just ways of saying, I'm the first one and the last one. Blessed are those doing his commands, so that the authority shall be theirs unto the tree of life, okay, and to enter through the gates of the city. So those who do his commands are going to have the authority to everlasting life. They will eat of the tree of life, and they will have the authority to enter into the city. But outside are the dogs, the sorcerers, those who whore, and the murderers, and the idolaters, and all who love and do falsehood. We know what the truth is. We know what falsehood is. We'll end the Torah portion there because that appears to be the last slide. But that's quite an incredible promise that we're given. I hope that at least gives you some things that you can reconcile. Well, wait there. Why is there a temple afterwards in the millennium? What about the city? What about what's described in Ezekiel? Is that the city? Is that the same thing? Why are the measurements different? All of those sorts of things. Okay? Let's end in prayer and thank Yahuwah for the promises that we, if we obey him, will be granted authority to enter the city. Father, I thank you that you've prepared something which we cannot even imagine now. Thank you that you've given us this promise through your friend Abraham. And thank you that we can be grafted in to your people. Thank you that we can serve you. Thank you that you've given us eyes to see and ears to hear. And thank you that you've given us a heart that is set upon your word. Thank you that you promised to those people who desire to do these things and desire to please you and to walk in obedience, that you've given them the promise of being able to enter into the city where there will be no night. Thank you that you've given us this taste of the amazing things which you have prepared for those who love you. Thank you, Father. Amen.